Resident Evil 9's development is well underway, with many fans speculating as to what we could expect to see from Capcom for their final game in the franchise's third mainline trilogy. Just today we got a little extra insight from renowned leaker Dusk Gollum, who went on to mention that, quote, "The thing I think people will realise when RE9 is revealed is the reason this game is taking so long is because it's like a big reinvention of the series. To the same level as RE4 and RE7, it's not going to play just like RE7, RE8 or the remakes, it's trying new things and very ambitious. It will almost definitely be revealed this year, so just hold tight," end quote. While this isn't much to go on, it does line up with the consecutive rumours that mention the game's reveal to happen this year at some point. The part about it being a big reinvention of the series is quite intriguing though, as the rumour does compare it to the likes of RE4 and 7, which were both very significant pivot points for the franchise. So what could this mean exactly? From my perspective, I'm wagering my bets on the game moving to an open world design, which many other rumours have pointed towards, and I think many linear and semi-open world games do tend to go towards this direction at some point within their cycle of their franchise. And with, as I said, the many rumours that are circulating with Capcom going for an open world experience with RE9, I wouldn't be too surprised if it does come to fruition. But once again, of course, this is a complete rumour that I'm basing this theory on, or this prediction on, so do take that for what it is. But if we did go towards an open world game direction, what are the pros and cons exactly? And I feel like we'll start off with the pros, as I feel like there are less pros, but of course they're fairly impactful, and I feel like the cons play off the pros, as it all depends on the execution. But I think the big pro in this circumstance would be that it would be a new, fresh take on the series, as we don't have any other games in the franchise that are truly open world games. Of course, we had RE1 style of design, where it's semi-open world, and you had the entire Spencer mansion, which was explorable to an extent, but certain sections would be closed off and opened based on where you are in the game. So of course I wouldn't consider that an actual open world game. It's a bit of a middle ground where a few aspects are taken from an open world scenario and the rest are fairly linear. And I think this would also put a big emphasis on resource management as well, which I think has always been a part of Resident Evil since day one, especially in Resident Evil 1, where if you play as Chris, for example, and you only have 6 item spaces in your inventory, you truly did have to manage what items you were going to bring along with you, whether that was more ammunition or more heals, or even if you had enough of either of those two to progress swiftly through the game, you might get to a situation where you run out of bullets and heals and you're pretty much screwed. But of course it depends how they want to manage this part of the development, and if they do want to go really heavy on this system. It would be really cool to see. From my perspective, I think it would be really cool if we had a massive open area for exploring, for example Raccoon City, and then you're going to have to truly make sure that you have enough bullets to transition between the certain segments of the city and enough healing items and whatnot. And I think if they did put more of an emphasis on this, they could even go as far as maybe even implementing a food and hydration system if they really wanted to go all the way. But of course that's kind of going off on a bit of a tangent. I don't see a Resident Evil game doing that, but you get my point. It would be really cool if they were able to focus more on this, especially since they've never done open world before. So I think it would truly be refreshing for a Resident Evil game to have, as long as it's done properly. And then to top it all off, of course, it would have enhanced exploration. And the game that comes to mind in terms of this would be Days Gone, which of course is another zombie game, and this was an open world zombie game, which was really cool. And you would come across hordes of zombies, and sometimes there'll just be a few zombies, and it truly did add to the horror, especially with those gigantic hordes you would find. So if they were able to capture this in some way for a Resident Evil game where you're playing as Leon or Jill, as some of the other rumours have stated we're going to be playing as them, I think that would be extremely revitalizing for the series. And if they are trying to go for something ambitious and aiming for that big reinvention, I think if they're able to do this correctly, this would be a massive win. And then in terms of cons, or I should say the things that they should be very cautious of if they do go in this direction, would be first of all balancing the gameplay between its horror, exploration and action, as if they are truly actually bringing back the older characters like Leon S. Kennedy and Jill Valentine, we can probably bet that there is going to be a fair bit of action in this game, but they still can add the horror elements, as I was saying before in the pros section, where if they did have a massive horde of zombies, just that overwhelming nature of how many zombies there are would definitely still overwhelm our characters. And I think this would be a good way to make sure that there isn't a loss of tension, as I feel like an open world game, if done wrong, can easily lose that survival horror element, especially if the areas are really open. Which brings me on to our next point, which is the loss of classic tight areas. As if you do remember with like the Resident Evil 1 and 2 locations, those of course being the Spencer Mansion and RPD, they had a lot of tight corridors and claustrophobic spaces, so they would have to make sure that if they do go open world, they're still implementing those key locations which are still keeping those tight corridors and very tense gameplay intact. But I think especially coming off the back of Resident Evil 6, I think Capcom have learnt their lesson with making sure they're keeping survival horror within their Resident Evil games, so I'm sure this shouldn't hopefully be a concern. And then we have the technical challenges, which unfortunately I feel like Capcom have failed us slightly on recently with Monster Hunter Wilds, where they went for that massive open world design, especially with its new locations and its attempt at utilizing the RE engine to its fullest. They did run into the issue of, one, poor textures for the most part given what the game is actually running, and then in addition to that, the performance has not been great across the board. And if they ran into this issue again after Dragon's Dogma and then Monster Hunter and then onto Resident Evil 9, I think it would tarnish a lot of what the developers have built up since their comeback with Resident Evil 7. But of course, once again, I'm hoping that Capcom have learnt from their mistakes and it has translated across to the Resident Evil team, and that if they are going for this open world design, they're able to take into account the technical challenges and just push back the game if they need to, as this clearly wasn't the case with Monster Hunter Wilds. But that's a video topic for another day, with how badly they executed on the performance side of Monster Hunter Wilds, which I think is a phenomenal game, but it suffered a lot. And I feel like a lot of players have dropped off the game waiting for it to be fixed, so hopefully they don't run into this again with Resident Evil 9. But of course, guys, all of this is speculation and rumours, and many are already very suspicious of everything out there currently on what we could expect to see for Resident Evil 9, as we've got no official information, and a lot of these videos are just based on someone on the internet saying something. Of course, in this case, it is Dusk Golem that has mentioned this information, who has in the past predicted some stuff or even given us information that turned out to be true. But once again, it's not official, so do take it for what it is, and it's not 100% confirmed, but it's always fun to speculate. So definitely drop your comments down below as to what you think about Resident Evil 9, and if it were to become open world, could it work? Would you guys be a fan of it? Drop your thoughts down below, and I look forward to reading all of your comments. As always, a like would be extremely appreciated if you did enjoy the video. It does help the channel a ton, and subscribe for a lot more Resident Evil content. Don't forget to join our Discord, links at the top of the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.